Say my name. I am awake. I am the danger. I am the one who knocks.
Welcome to the next episode, Breaking Into Breaking Bad. Clifford and Caleb Humphrey. This is season 2, episode 9, titled 4 Days Out. Quick synopsis of this episode. It's pretty straightforward, right? It begins with the whole gang, right? Walt and Skyler and Walter Jr. and Marie and Hank sitting in the doctor's office, waiting for Walt to get his, let me get this right, his PET and his something else scan, 2 different scans. His CT scan, right? Marie's
gotta have both of them.
That's
Sometimes
right.
they don't do it, you know?
Yeah. So the episode begins with that, and it ends with him getting his results about his cancer. And turns out that his cancer is in remission, and that's a big deal, as we will find out. And in between, it's like a week that passes. And in the days in between is when most of this episode happens. And it's when Walt basically sneaks out into the desert with Jesse to cook a fantastic amount of crystal meth. And they have various adventures, sundry adventures, and it almost cost them their life, and they almost don't make it out alive. Somehow they do. They're able to come back because chemistry and science prevail, and he's able to come back, and Skyler doesn't even miss him. And then he gets the diagnosis, and that's the whole episode. A lot happens, but it's 4 days out in the desert. And so the title of this episode, 4 Days Out, that's what it stands for, I think, right? 4 days out in the...
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. It's one of those very straightforward, not cryptic at all, I don't think, titles. So we don't have to spend much time on that. Okay, so a lot of these episodes begin with a kind of a strange intro. And this one began, and I just didn't even think about the intro, and then the credits rolled, and I realized, oh, that was the intro, right? So the intro was all of them sitting in the doctor's office waiting to, for Walt to go in for his scan. So it begins in this really weird way. I don't know if you noticed this. It begins by looking at the 4 of them in the doctor's office in the background, and in the foreground is a fountain of water. Water is like pouring out of this fountain.
Right.
Okay. It ends with something very similar, with Walt's hands under the faucet and water pouring over them. Like why? Like there's a symmetry there, right? Maybe what in our discussion. So we'll come back to that at the end. Why the water thing?
Yeah, I have a quick. I think
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, it just reminded me of one of the lessons that Walt was talking about. What was it, like death and decay? And so like at one point it's showing.
Wait, is this a lesson in chemistry class or something?
Yeah, not nothing personally, just something a previous episode.
Okay.
He talks about how when he's talking about the change and what chemistry is and matter and all that kind of stuff. The beginning of the episode starts with, the water, and everyone's just kind of preparing for the worst. And then at the end, it's the water, but he just got the best news, So I don't know what that means to us, the viewer, but like, I honestly didn't even think about that. So this is the first time considering that, but yeah, good call out.
Yeah. Well, like I said, when we get into the episode, we'll discover that water actually plays a pretty important role in the episode, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. So Marie has this weird comment about like, make sure it's this scan and not just that scan. Right? She's being kind of nosy.
Right.
But then she adds this comment. She says, we could just do this. We could just do these scans at my hospital, and then I could look at the results myself and tell you, because I'm a technician, and you got to know, she says, technicians are smarter than doctors. She says, a lot of times you'd be surprised, she says, how often the doctors come to the technicians and ask them for input, for help.
Yep.
Right. And that's funny, because when Walt goes in to get his scan, and he's talking to the technician, and he asks the technician, well, what do you see? And the guy's like, I don't know, I'm just a technician. The doctor will call you in a little bit. It was
true. They're probably made
left
to say that, because they're technically, they don't have the license, they don't have the PhD, so they can't
the MD,
give a diagnosis, or the MD,
Well,
so they can't give a diagnosis, even though they probably know what it is. They just can't.
Well, so that was my point, though, is that like Walt looks at the scan himself and he sees that giant mass.
Right. Self-diagnoses himself.
Right. And he's thinking, I think, of Marie's comment, and he's asking the technician, and the technician says, no, I can't. I have no idea. Now, the technician could have said that because he just has no idea, or he's not allowed to, and he knows, and he's feigning ignorance. But then he could have said, listen, I'm not really allowed to say. But it could also be, and this is how I perceived Walt's perception of it, was like, he doesn't want to tell me. He wants the doctor to be the one that has to tell me. It's his job. He gets paid a lot to have to tell people really bad news like that.
Correct. Yep.
But what's the point? Why include that? Why include Marie's comment about technicians? They know a whole lot more than doctors, and then have this technician contradict that, right? The only thing I could come up with for why include that little bit, which is too, like, I can't believe that it's accidental, but I think it plays into a larger question of this, or theme of this episode, which was trust. You don't really know if you can trust that technician, if he's telling the truth or not. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, as we find out later on in the episode, Walt is able to get these 4 days out of the house, and he tells Skylar that he's going to go up and visit his mother, which is a very plausible thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what's clear is Walt is 100% convinced that his cancer is on the move, growing, and his days are absolutely numbered. He's going to be dead in days.
Big time.
And so he knows, I've got to get out into the desert and cook as much freaking meth as possible. And he has to manipulate Jesse to drop whatever he's doing for that day and get out there with him right now and not waste any time. And so he lies.
Because, the methylamine, it'll go bad.
The methylamine will go bad. Yeah, it's got a really short half-life. And yeah. So he has to manipulate him, right? And Jesse discovers that lie. He knows, he figures it out.
Right.
The methylamine's not going bad. You lied to me to get me out here. And then at the end, when they're back at the airport, Walt says, hey, can I trust you to? Mm-hmm. And he doesn't finish the sentence, but the sentence would have been, if I'm dead in like 4 days, will you sell this meth and then give my share? Make sure that like my family gets my share. And it occurred to me, like, Jesse could be like, oh yeah, no, of course I will. Like, why would Jesse ever do that? He does. There's so much trust that's required. And when it's one thing to trust people, like when you're living, to do things for you, but when you're dead and you're not able to enforce it in any kind of way, right? It's why wills are such a big deal, right? We call them wills because this is what I will to be done, but I'm not around to enforce it. So we have legal mechanisms to make those things happen. But yeah, like I said, I think trust is a big thing here.
No, I want to kind of go off of that because if you take a couple episodes back to mid season 1, Walt and Jesse had to earn that trust with each other through shared experiences, right? Mm-hmm. They've been through so much at this point, and especially having to deal with problem solving, how to get out of the predicament that they were in, mm-hmm. And so it was easy for Walt to trust Jesse to do that because the shared experiences that they've had is like, how could you not be compassionate for the other person? Because exactly what that other person went through because you were right along with them. So, to me, as they've gone through this, they've had failures, they've overcome, they've succeeded, and then they have more failures and they overcome, succeed. Like that is just built more and more into their partnership, even though it was predicated off of a blackmail in the beginning. It's blossomed into something that I don't know if Walt saw when he first approached Jesse about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think affection for the friendship that they have has, in various ways, it surprised them both. But it's not like it's butterflies and rainbows, and they're just full of affection for each other. I mean, there's
Right.
tons of frustration, especially you see in this episode. And let's just let's point out, Jesse has lots of reasons to be frustrated at Walt. He manipulated him, right? Jesse had this wonderful day planned sort of with Jane.
Yeah.
Jane had a wonderful day planned for both of them. And he has to tell her say, hey, I can't do that. I've got to go into the desert for a couple days, with this guy. And so he makes a choice in that moment. Should I pursue the relationship and the potential romance that's there, which everything around him should tell him human flourishing, my friend, lies in that direction. Get married, have a family, like all the people you see in your life that are happy. Follow that path.
Right. That's where the happiestness is like the George O'Keefe, like, why would you not go there?
Right. Exactly. And yet, no, but he's manipulated, right? Walt tells him, we don't have a choice. The methylamine that we risked to get is going bad, and we have to cook it now. Right. So Jesse has every reason to be frustrated at Walt, but then, as we see when they get out into the desert, one thing after another, Walt has every reason to be frustrated at Jesse for acting the way that he does, and such a way that he solves one problem and creates two other problems, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
By everything that he does. And so they're both, but a lot of it was sort of human. I would say there's more malice on Walt's part for intentionally lying to Jesse to manipulate him, to get him into the desert without a care for what was going on in Jesse's life. Whereas Jesse, like when he puts the keys in the ignition of the RV, because Walt's like, don't put the keys on the workstation. So Jesse's like, I don't know where I'm gonna put the keys. So he puts them in the ignition of the RV, and it drains the battery. He didn't mean to drain the battery. It was the last thing he wanted to do.
Right. But at this point, he's done things like that so many times in Walt's mind. Walt is just like, there's nothing that you can do right, like and when he threw out all their water to put out the fire
that was on the generator that they were using to jump the battery.
That was like a last straw. He didn't even question it. He just knew. He expected. He's like, of course, Jesse, of course, well done. Like he didn't even like, why would you do that? How could you do this? He just, of course,
right.
And
right.
So it's very.
He had a half a thought where Walt had a whole thought. The half a thought was, water puts out fire.
Yep.
Right. He didn't think, water is also going to short out the generator, and we're not going to be able to drink anything to survive, for the next couple of days. So they both have reasons to be frustrated with each other. But my point, though, still stands that I think there was no malice on Jesse's part. He didn't intend to put them in those predicaments. He was just not as bright. Right. Yeah, whereas Walt used his superior intellect to manipulate Jesse. That's
one might argue that Walt's manipulation came from a selfless place.
How so?
Because in his mind, he was going to be dead any day now. And he was not thinking for himself at this point. He's about to die. What does it matter to him? He was trying to still continue his work to do for his family, right?
Yeah.
So there's in his mind, he is rationalizing it to whatever I got to do, because at the end it is a good thing.
Yeah, but he's still using Jesse as a means to help his family. What I thought you were going to say, and this is what I could see a logic to this. He could have said, "Hey, Jesse, I'll be honest with you. I think I'm going to be dead in a couple days, week, 2 weeks. You want a lot of money, and I want you to get a lot of money, Jesse. The only way you're going to get that money is if you and I drop what we're doing right now and go to the desert for 4 days, because I got this excuse I came up with." And he could have said that. He could have been completely honest with him and said, "Jesse, the only way you're going to get any money is if I help you cook a bunch of really good meth, and we've got to go now." He could have been completely honest, and I think Jesse would have said, "Okay, I see. I see the logic.
Yes,
I see what we got to
he
do.
would
Let's
have.
go. Yeah,
He would have,
but he didn't.
for sure.
He chose to manipulate him. So he was being selfless insofar as he was thinking to himself, I'm doing this for my family. But again,
Right.
he's not being selfless toward Jesse. And
Right.
he
No,
could
he's definitely too prideful.
Yeah, or he didn't think it was going to work. I don't know why he didn't choose that option with Jesse. Maybe it was this. Maybe it was his first thought, and he just went with it. His first thought, which is interesting, was to lie.
Sure, because that's all he's been doing. But the one thing that was kind of crazy, though, is it made me think of his conversation that he had with Hank about, like, now I sleep fine. I had all this fear in my life before, but
yeah.
But all of a sudden he sees that the mass on the reflection, and all of a sudden that fear took over him, and it made him dictate kind of bad decisions, and that almost got him killed. But like he had the idea that he was going to die, but seeing that, and it brought it like it made it more real for him, I feel like, and at that point, the fear did take over him, and.
Okay, couple things. So Walt tells Skylar that he's going to go visit his mother, and we don't know where she lives, but he has to fly. He has to fly there. So she drops him off at the airport, and the last thing she says to him is "Fly safe." Which the first time I heard it, I was like, "Yeah, okay, sure." And then I was like, "Wait a minute! Like, he's not flying the plane. Like, what do you mean fly safe? Like, so it could be a little thing. I mean, she probably just meant like, don't be careless. Just be cautious when you're flying. There's lots of other people around, and don't leave your luggage or something like that. But it also came across a little bit to me as sort of eat your veggie bacon, fly safe, make sure you're safe, wear a mask,
don't talk to strangers. Yeah.
Yeah. It just felt a little like more of the same kind of Skylar treating him like he's not really a man that can take care of himself. And she's overly concerned about safety, which is something that, par the course for her character. But anyway, just mention that fly safe. The other thing I noticed is that I thought Walt was being over the top condescending and paternalistic to Jesse when they're getting out to everything, when they're getting out to the desert, and when they're there setting everything up. There's just it's very antagonistic between the two of them. Funyuns, I can't believe you got Funyuns. How do you eat anything around here? How do you survive? And for a guy who's smart, knows that he needs Jesse, he's not at all interested in being remotely kind to him. Like I said, it's very condescending and paternalistic.
Well, he is when Jesse actually brings a valid idea. And you see that at the end of the episode before, like when Jesse's just going through different ideas. And then he was he went back into his teacher mode where he was like, and then we get this and we get this. And what about, what is this? And he's like, wire, and it's like, no, it's copper.
Yeah. Huh.
But that is only like few and far between that Jesse brings a good thought that Walt respects. Everything else that Jesse does, he doesn't.
Yeah. So maybe this goes back to your point about him shifting between Heisenberg and Walt. And so the guy who shows up at the airport to get picked up by, he's Heisenberg already. He's lied to Jesse to get him to pick him up. And then the first thing he says, I can't believe you picked me up in the RV, and like to the airport, Yeah. You better fly to the airport. Yeah. So he starts out that way, and he kind of remains in that state as Heisenberg until, like you said, when Jesse gets him to think and to use his brain and quit being negative and start being positive.
Why do you think Jesse called Skinny Pete instead of Badger combo?
Yeah, I don't know. I would never have called Skinny Pete. Maybe I have no idea. Maybe he's the only one.
The only thing I can think of is, I was going to say maybe he's the only one that really has a car, so that was probably it. But it's like, wait, what do you mean? What river?
What river? Yeah.
So who knows? Who knows what happened
to
Skinny Pete that whole time?
I mean, this episode was really like dramatic. It was very reminiscent of movies about like people getting stranded out, on the ice and the snow, like you're gonna die, or something. I mean,
what would you have done in that situation? Would you have been able to make a battery out of random parts?
Hell no. I would not have been able to, would not have figured that out. No, I think I would have taken my chances earlier and left to go. I mean, 15 miles is, I know it's hot.
It was 15 miles and then another 13 miles.
Oh, really? Well,
yeah.
I would have taken my chances there. I think I would have traveled at night when it's not as hot and it's cold. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. New Mexico. I don't really know much about New Mexico. So I know I know it does get cold at night, even when it's really friggin' hot in the day. So, but without any water, in a very, very, very dry climate, it's tough. Here's a question. Do you think that Jesse was actually acting irrationally when he put the key in the ignition? Like, was that genuinely a bad place to put the keys?
I think honestly, when he was complaining, like, no, it didn't buzz. There's the buzz. I always hear the buzz. Well, now I don't even have I have a push start, so it's a little different. But before then, there was always some kind of ding, ding, ding. So no, I don't think it was him making a like you said before. There's no malice coming from that,
right. Well, it wasn't. Honestly, I'm not asking was it malicious. I'm just asking was it a stupid thing to do? Because Walt was like, "You can't believe you did that,"
Oh, it definitely was stupid. Yeah, no, for sure.
Oh, you think stupid. So?
Yeah, because even if you put the key in the ignition and turned it to the point where it was not draining the battery, it's risky. Like there's so many other options. Glove compartment, on the dashboard, up on the the visor, like so many different options.
Cup holder, come on now, put it in the cup holder.
Yeah. So
right.
Yeah, it was dumb.
I don't think it was going to buzz. I don't think he was going to hear the buzz unless he opened the driver's side door, which I don't think they did. I think they always came out the other door.
Yeah, good point. But yeah, dumb move for sure.
Okay, so there was that misfortune, which is in part due to Walt's kind of OCD about, no, you can't put the keys on the workstation, Like he was being a little
dramatic,
over the top. Yeah. I thought. But so that example, and then when they tried to start the RV with the generator and it caught on fire because of the gas and all that, I mean, I can imagine in a panic situation, you see fire and you've got a thing of water and you think I have to put the flames out. I could see that making sense. Like it was a very human. I thought it was a very human thing to do.
Sure.
Like these misfortunes that they encountered were very human. Not having any cell service on Jesse's phone. These are things we can all understand, And so what my point though is that in this episode, they are subject to misfortune, which everyone luck, it kind of happens. Sometimes you get good luck, sometimes you get bad luck. But I don't know. Do you think they were adequately prepared for it? Because you've got to assume you're going to get some bad luck.
Yeah, I mean, that was the only thing that caused them problems. They really did have everything else. I mean, obviously there was a bunch of junk food, but they honestly, he didn't have enough. Like they ran out of gas, and they still had a lot of methylene left. But like they like Jesse suggested, they still could have gone into town and gone to Denny's and fixed the problem. But no, they weren't. Obviously, they weren't 100% ready for this.
Get a grand slam.
Oh, yeah, you got to a shower.
So the thing that initially makes them want to work together to make the meth there in the desert is common self-interest, right? Like they both are going to win individually by this cooperation that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But when all the misfortune happens, then it's necessity that's requiring them to work together in order to survive, right? It's not like, okay, I'm gonna win out of this. And we're gonna go to the desert to do this. Like necessity is requiring them to do everything possible to crank the thing by hand to try and make it work. Which I thought was a brilliant attempt, and it happened exactly what you'd think. Because that was physically just draining, especially when they don't have a lot of water. They have no water.
Mm-hmm.
and they have to try and start this RV, and then it starts and then it cuts off. Like, how demoralizing must that have felt?
Right. Well, Jesse showed it in his face pretty well. Like he was grinding his teeth.
Is that when he
really
says?
Defeated.
Is that when he says, "I should have gone to Santa Fe"?
Yes.
So that was the lowest point, I think,
right,
for him. That's when he's saying, knowing how much money he was potentially going to make with all that meth, he could still say, I wish I had just gone to Santa Fe.
Yep.
Because if he's dead, none of that's going to matter anyway.
Yeah, that was even though it didn't defeat him, but it was the biggest blow to his ability to survive at that point, because he didn't know what else to do. But I will say that he held it together more than Walt did, and normally Walt's always problem solving, thinking of some way to get out of it. But Jesse, even though defeated, and it was maybe it's because he was the one that did it, but like he's the one that kept on thinking, like, come on, like, let's build a robot, like, let's do this,
well,
and it worked out.
Yeah. So two things about that. One thing, Jesse doesn't really understand the chemistry, right? He doesn't really know. So for him, it's sort of like having this like magician around who's able to just like reach his hand into a hat and pull a bunny out sometimes. And he's just like, yeah, why don't you just do that? Like, you're a smart guy, Heisenberg, do the thing, make it happen, pull a bunny out of the hat. Like, he doesn't understand like what's involved. Right now, he gets lucky at that point because Walt is able to pull another bunny out of the hat. But I think from Walt's perspective, Jesse's like, yeah, let's make a robot. Like, it sounds pretty naive, like you don't really know what's involved here.
Right. He's not thinking of the cathodes and the anodes and stuff like that.
Right. So in one hand, it's easier for him to be optimistic because he's just like, well, whenever we need to, we can just pull a bunny out of the hat. But Walt knows all the tricks. He knows what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing, though, is that Walt genuinely thinks he's about to die, like days, hours, maybe away from death. When he's sitting there on his knees with his hand covered in lung blood. So he's got this other thing making him feel pessimistic that Jesse doesn't have. Now, you could easily say, well, shouldn't that have just motivated him to be like, well, like, look, I'm going to die anyway. Might as well just, let's try anything, But I think it was a pretty human response to feel defeated. And he's just physically weak. He's feeling it a lot more than Jesse, this young guy,
It's becoming very real.
And he's had all the radiation and the chemo, whatever. I mean, he's physically just in a bad place. Mm-hmm. So he is defeated, and Jesse is, the one, because remember, it was flipped not that long ago, right? When Jesse was he witnessed the murder of the ATM machine crushing the guy's head, and Walt was in there giving him the pep talk, get back in the game, Now Walt's the one who's defeated, and Jesse's the one saying, come on, Walt, like, quit all of this negative talk. Let's get out there and let's figure something out.
Right.
I'll make one comment, and I think we'll come back to it at the very end, which is that when they're sitting there at night, I think it's at night, and they're talking, and Jesse's trying to like revive Walt's spirits a little bit. He's asking him about like what they're doing, and Walt says, everything I've done for my family. I realized, okay, he's got this strong desire to help his family. Nobody denies that. Mm-hmm. But he's having to balance his desire to help his family with the knowledge that he's lying to them in increasing levels. And you can tell it bothers him. I think he cries out like, oh, the lies.
Right. And he then talks about this briefly with Saul, and Saul's like, think about this. Like, where are you going to tell her you got all this money from? And he was like, oh no, I'm just, just tell her when I'm gone, Like, I don't want to face this,
Right. Yeah. But point there is that he's starting to realize, I think for the first time, that the lies are undermining his desire to help his family.
Right.
He's realizing these things are not able to go together. And that the lie was supposed to be a means to the end of helping his family, but that means might be undermining the very end that he was seeking to begin with.
Right. It's more of a pleasant thing to always think about and say, like, oh, no, well, I know I did this bad thing, but it was because of this really good thing,
Yeah. Right. Okay. So the remarkable part of this whole episode is when they make the battery out of all the parts, and Walt completely flips. Doesn't seem dehydrated or tired or about to die or anything. He's excited. He's using his brain in his favorite way, which is using chemistry to accomplish solve some problem. And once again, the theme of this whole show is that chemistry is front and center. And here he's using it as a way of saving their lives. He's preserving life. It's interesting that Jesse says, come on, think of something scientific. He says, you made poison out of beans. The ricin.
Right.
But that example is, he's like, come on, remember that time you used chemistry to bring about death? Here, he wants him to use chemistry to bring about life in a way, to save their lives. Right. And so he's recognizing that the power of chemistry works both ways. The most mysterious part of this whole episode, when Walt punches the tissue dispenser.
Right.
He's just gotten his diagnosis that his cancer is 80% reduced in size. At the very end, after he's gotten back from the desert, he almost died out there. And he was under the belief the entire time that his cancer had grown immensely and that it was over. And now he's learned that it's 80% reduced in size. And then he goes into the bathroom, sees his reflection in the aluminum metal tissue dispenser, and he punches it like 6, 7, 8 times or something. And you can see blood. He's bloodied his knuckles.
Yep.
Why does he punch the tissue dispenser?
So I think it obviously it's an emotional response to a lot that just went like swinging both ways. And I think ultimately he was very upset at himself for the way he responded to the situation and almost ruined everything. That it was a way to just be like, what were you thinking? Like snap out of it type of thing. But obviously after going through all of that, thinking you're going to die, and then you're like, all right, well, I'm not going to die from the cancer. Now I'm just going to die from stupidity. And, now I'm actually not going to die. And I'm actually 80% reduction in cancer. Like that is such a crazy emotional roller coaster that, I get it. Punching something like that. Like I get it, and I don't know. Do you have a thought?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you're right that it has been a roller coaster, but that doesn't satisfy it to me. Why? I mean, he punches the heck out of that thing. He has serious anger. So I was asking myself, like, what could he be so angry at? And I thought of a couple things. I thought maybe he was so resigned to death that he was angry that he wasn't going to die, because he was just like accepted it and had everything set in order and that was going to happen, But that doesn't really satisfy me. The thing that I think ultimately what made him so angry is that he realizes he's changed himself now in such a way that he's never going to be able to go back to who he was before. And the reason that he did the things like murdering Crazy 8 and all the other things was because he was 100% convinced he was going to die. And so he made these choices that affected his character, that changed him forever, which he didn't think was going to last very long. And now he's going to have to live with himself the rest of, might be a long time, as a guy who's done these things and is now forever different because of them. And I think he knows he's not going to be able to stop.
Yeah. I mean, if you were to ask him right now with that mindset, like, do you think he would go back and to how things were and not have done all those things? Or does he like this new Heisenberg, lifestyle? But I think you hit the nail on the head with saying, like, he knows that he's in too far at this point and he won't be able to stop,
Yeah. Yeah.
Too many wheels are turning, too many people are involved. It's
And it's sort of out of his hands now. But like I said, he's also just altered himself in such a way that he's never going to be able to go back. And that's the most terrifying thing, I think, as I contemplate the significance of, the moral of this show so far, at least, which is just that we are constantly shaping ourselves. And, in a way, again, he thought he was doing it for a reason that was a noble one, helping his family. But at what cost? Because his family needed him and needs him at this point to be solid, good, dependable, Walt. And at this point, he could be arrested at any moment as the kingpin of meth in Albuquerque.
Right.
And guess how that's going to help his family? Not at all.
Yeah.
And so he has embraced a degree of risk and opened himself up to vulnerability that he never had to.
Yeah. I think in the next few episodes, it's going to be very interesting to see how he makes choices, knowing what he knows now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm eager to see what those choices are.
As am I, for the 14th time.
All right. Well, I think that's all we got for this episode.
Yeah. No, that was good. Yeah, everyone, appreciate you if you lasted this long listening. After we close this episode, as always, please like, share, subscribe. If you enjoyed it, please give us a 5-star rating. Any helpful comments we appreciate. And we'll see you next time when we break into another episode of Breaking Bad.